The shove came from nowhere. Alicia Carter felt the impact before she understood it. Bone on bone, breath knocked loose as a shoulder slammed into a steel barricade. Sirens wailed somewhere behind her, washing the street in red and blue. Rain clung to the air, metallic and sharp. She caught herself, palm scraping cold metal, heart pounding so loud it drowned the noise. "Move," the officer said, not looking at her. "Now." Alicia straightened. She was used to being unseen in rooms that mattered. Boardrooms, server halls. This was different. This was public. Her hands trembled, then stilled. "I'm not blocking anything," she said, voice low. "Careful. I'm waiting." The officer finally turned. His eyes skimmed her hoodie, her braids, her skin, and slid past as if she were furniture. "You people always are." The word sliced cleanly. A suited white man stood beside her, untouched, unquestioned. The officer waved him through with a nod. Alicia swallowed. She tasted iron. Around them, phones rose. Someone laughed nervously. Someone else looked away. The city did what it always did, watch without choosing. The officer stepped closer, crowding her space. His voice dropped, intimate and dangerous. "Don't make this difficult." Alicia felt the old fear surge, then something else beneath it. Memory. Late nights. Locked doors. Systems she had built quietly, invisibly, while men like him never learned her name. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. Across the street, a massive digital billboard flickered to life. The officer turned toward it and froze. Officer Mark Reynolds didn't look at her face when he shoved past. His shoulder clipped Hayes, hard enough to make her stumble against the cold metal barricade. "Move. Now," he said. Alicia Carter caught herself before she fell. The street smelled like rain and gasoline. Red and blue lights flashed against storefront glass, turning a reflection into a stranger with shaking hands. "I'm not blocking anything," Alicia said. Her voice surprised her with its steadiness. "I'm waiting for my car." Reynolds finally looked at her. His eyes flicked from her hoodie to her braids, then away, already bored. "You people always say that." The words landed sharp, precise. Alicia felt them lodge under her ribs. Behind her, a white man in a suit stood in the same spot, untouched. Reynolds didn't glance at him. "Sir," the man said, uncertain, "am I okay here?" Reynolds nodded without hesitation. "You're fine." Alicia opened her mouth. Closed it. She'd learned which moments swallowed words whole. "I'm going to need you to step back," Reynolds said. "Closer now." Too close. His hand hovered near his belt. "Don't make this difficult." "I have a permit," Alicia said. She reached into her pocket slowly. Every movement felt measured, rehearsed. "I work 3 blocks from here." "Didn't ask," Reynolds said. "Step back." Someone nearby raised a phone. Another person turned away. The city breathed around them, indifferent. Alicia stepped back. The barricade pressed into her spine. Reynolds leaned in, his voice dropping. "You don't want trouble tonight." Trouble. The word echoed. It always did. Alicia thought of her mother's warnings, of meetings where men talked over her while praising diversity, of contracts signed without her name on the headline. "I'm not causing trouble," she said. "You are." Reynolds laughed softly. "That's cute." He pushed her again. Harder. This time she didn't stumble. She straightened, heart hammering, eyes locked on his badge number. She memorized it the way she memorized server keys and access logs. "Step away," Reynolds said, louder, for the crowd. "Last warning." Alicia stepped aside. The street opened for him, for everyone else. As he walked off, his radio crackled. "Unit 12, check with Central." Reynolds answered without slowing. "Copy." Alicia stood there, hands clenched, breath shallow. The phone in her pocket vibrated. Once. Twice. She looked down. Unknown number. She didn't answer. Not yet. Across the street, a digital billboard flickered, then stabilized. A blue logo pulsed alive, familiar and quiet. Her company's logo. Alicia lifted her gaze as Reynolds stopped mid-step, staring at the screen while his radio screamed her name. The crowd murmured. Phones tilted. Alicia felt the old fear loosen, replaced by something colder. Control. She had built it quietly, behind screens and contracts, in rooms where men forgot she listened. Reynolds toned, confusion cracking his posture. The billboard refreshed again, scrolling city infrastructure partners. Her name appeared, clean and unmistakable. Alicia met his eyes, said nothing. The silence did the work. Somewhere, a producer booked airtime. Somewhere else, an attorney smiled. Reynolds swallowed. The night seemed to lean closer, waiting. Sirens faded. A bus hissed. Alicia exhaled slowly, steadying herself for what came next. Power never erased harm. It only changed who listened. She would make them listen. Tonight began the reckoning, public and precise, a chain reaction she could not stop even if she wanted. The screen glowed. The city watched. Alicia stood her ground, knowing the cost would follow her home, into sleep, into memory, but forward was the only direction left. She waited. The night held its breath. For the fallout. Ahead. Alicia Carter leaned back in her leather chair, heels tapping against the polished floor. The office smelled of ozone and fresh electronics, a quiet hum from the server walls lining the perimeter. Nexus grid wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. Every emergency call, every traffic signal, every city camera in the downtown core depended on her networks. She ran the veins of the city, invisible and precise. "Morning, Alicia," said Ramon, her CTO, leaning against the doorway. His laptop bag sagged over one shoulder. "The traffic feed in the East Borough is lagging again. Third time this week." She didn't look up. "Schedule a server sweep for tonight. No excuses." Her tone wasn't sharp, but there was no room for error. In her company, precision was survival. Ramon hesitated. "You want me to escalate it to city IT?" Alicia finally met his eyes. "They'll call it a glitch. We fix it, quietly. They never notice. That's the point." Ramon nodded, exhaling. "Always invisible, huh?" She smiled faintly, without warmth. Invisible. That word carried decades of weight. Investors who dismissed her at meetings. Contractors who forgot her name. City officials who nodded politely as she explained systems they couldn't touch. Invisible, except when she faltered, or when someone like Reynolds decided to remind her of her skin. Her phone buzzed. Another missed call from her assistant, Jenna. Alicia silenced it. Public recognition was the last thing she needed. Control mattered more than applause. A knock at the door drew her attention. Jenna entered, carrying a folder thick with city compliance reports. "They are asking for a sit-down. Department of Transportation. Big men in suits." Alicia gestured for her to leave it on the desk. "I'll respond later." Jenna frowned. "After today, maybe sooner than later." Alicia inhaled slowly. She remembered the shove on the street, the crowd, the flashing red and blue lights, the words that had cut through her. "You people always say that." The phrase lingered like smoke. She had built systems to prevent accidents, to route ambulances in record time, to monitor city power grids and water flow. But no algorithm could root dignity. She wandered to the window, staring at the skyline. Everything below moved under a silent watch. Buses, delivery vans, pedestrians, taxis. She had seen hundreds of Reynoldses in her life, men confident their power was unquestioned, their bias invisible. The difference today? He had touched her in public, misjudged her, and she had power he couldn't even recognize. Yet, her phone buzzed again. This time, a secure line. She answered. "Are you okay?" Jenna's voice was tense. "Yes," Alicia said. "Flat. He doesn't know who he's dealing with. Not yet." Behind her, monitors blinked. Traffic rerouted. Cameras relined. Data flowing silently through her servers. The system she had built, the invisible backbone of a bustling city, waited at her command, and she knew exactly how to make them speak. She recalled another investor meeting, a group of older men in gray suits who had leaned back and asked, "Do you really think you can handle city contracts?" One had chuckled when she corrected a misrouted emergency line. She had smiled, signed the paperwork, and built a network that now governed more than one life at a time. Invisible power. Real control. Ramon cleared his throat. You ever think about just telling them off? Alicia laughed, low and dry. What's the point? Words don't stop systemic bias. Systems do. And I build systems. The hum of servers deepened. Every flickering screen was a reminder. The city trusted her unknowingly, relied on her invisibly, yet she remained underestimated. Reynolds' shove had been a violation, but one she could channel, one she could convert into leverage without ever raising her voice. She moved to the central console, fingers poised above the keyboard. She didn't need to threaten. She didn't need to yell. All she needed was to initiate protocol, to let the network speak quietly, elegantly, unassailably. She leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Let's make the city listen," she murmured. Outside, the rain tapped against glass, a rhythm echoing the pulse of a citywide network. Inside, Alicia plotted, not vengeance, not spectacle, but justice. The boardroom lights flickered as the first system notifications pinged. Emergency alerts rerouted. Traffic cameras refocused. Digital billboards cued. Every motion silent, but precise. Every system under her command, reinforcing a truth that no public shove could erase. And somewhere across town, Officer Reynolds had no idea that the woman he humiliated was, in effect, running the city he patrolled. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She prepared. The reckoning wasn't public yet, but it would be. And when it came, it would speak louder than any shove, any badge, any hollow threat. Mark Reynolds sat in the dim glow of the precinct break room, peeling the label off a lukewarm coffee cup. The taste was bitter, like every day in uniform lately. He replayed the scene on Madison Street, the shove, the hoodie, the braids, the words. "You know who that was?" Officer Harris asked, leaning against a vending machine, bag of chips in hand. "No clue," Reynolds said, shaking his head. "Just another." He paused. "You know." Harris smirked. "Yeah, one of those corporate types. Thinks she runs a city or something." Reynolds bristled. "She can't. She's, look, I don't care. I did my job. She got in the way." "You're telling me you didn't see her name on the feed?" Harris chuckled. "Central flagged it. Big deal in IT, apparently. But who even cares? She's just..." He shrugged. Reynolds ran a hand over his face. "I don't want politics in my streets. I just want order. People who know their place." Harris laughed. "Good luck with that." He took a bite of chips, crumbs scattering on the floor. Reynolds stared at the cup in his hands. He was used to compliance reports disappearing into drawers, citizen complaints being summarized and archived with minimal fuss. Supervisors rarely questioned misconduct unless cameras caught it. The system was predictable, safe, until tonight. Lieutenant Daniels entered, brisk and measured. "Reynolds, Internal Affairs wants a word." Reynolds stiffened. "For what?" "Shoving the woman downtown. Public complaint. Video surfaced." He scoffed. "A complaint? That woman." He stopped, realizing he couldn't say it. Not officially. Not with Daniel standing there, pen poised over a notepad. Daniel studied him. "This isn't just a minor incident. You got multiple witnesses, city security feeds, and now social media. We need a full report." "Full report." Reynolds echoed, voice tight. "I did my job. She was in the way." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Are you disputing her account?" Reynolds swallowed. "No. Look, I handled it. Calmly." She misread the situation. Daniel scribbled a note, then looked up. "You know the protocol. Administrative leave if this escalates. Don't make it worse." Reynolds left the room, jaw tight, heartbeat thudding. He didn't like being watched. Didn't like being challenged. Not in public. Not when he thought the badge gave him invisibility. Back at his desk, he scrolled through the footage again. Phones recorded. Street cameras recorded. The billboard flickering with that blue logo. The logo she owned. Owned the city's systems? He leaned back in his chair. It didn't make sense. How could a civilian, a woman he dismissed, control the lights, the traffic, the screens he swore ran the city? He tried to call someone, Harris, but stopped halfway. Everyone would laugh, write it off, say he was exaggerating. Even if he told the truth, no one would believe it. Reynolds gripped his radio. Unit 12, do you copy? Status check on Madison. Static. Then, Unit 12, everything's green. All systems normal. The city hummed beneath him, unaware, indifferent, and she was at the center of it. The humiliation, the loss of control, it all pressed down like lead. He remembered complaints from past patrols. Citizens overreacting. Accusations that vanished after a few clicks. But this felt permanent. A public exposure he couldn't erase. A woman he had shoved had the entire network at her command. He opened his laptop. Internal affairs forms, logs, previous citizen complaints, all cross-referenced. Names, dates, email addresses. Nothing incriminating against her. Just power. Invisible power that made him, Reynolds, look like a fool. Daniels appeared at the doorway again. You need to fill out the statement by the end of the day. And Reynolds, be thorough. Yes, sir, he muttered. Alone again. He closed the laptop. Tension curled in his chest like smoke. Every officer he spoke to offered polite amusement, sympathy, or indifference, but none offered solutions. His power felt hollow. The systems he relied on to feel invincible, surveillance feeds, dispatch protocols, backup, were, unknowingly, in her hands. He replayed the shove, the crowd's murmurs, the digital billboard pulsing with her authority. The city had always watched, yes, but now Reynolds realized with cold panic, it was a city to watch. The bitter taste of coffee lingered on his tongue. Safe had evaporated. Invisible power wasn't just for those in uniforms. Not anymore. And somewhere downtown, Alicia Carter was already planning the next move. He clenched his fists. He couldn't admit it, not to anyone. But the unease, the creeping dread, was real. The woman he dismissed had become the force he couldn't control. And in a system built to shield men like him, that was a dangerous, dangerous truth. The shove on Madison Street didn't stay local. By morning, the video circulated across social media like wildfire, short clip stitched with shaky camera angles and captions dripping with outrage. Phones vibrated endlessly. Notifications pinged on Alicia's encrypted devices. Morning, Alicia, Jenna said, entering the office with a tablet lit. You're trending. Again. Alicia didn't flinch. Let me guess, he's spinning it his way. Not even that, Jenna said, scrolling through. Mostly just clips, people shocked, outraged. Some calling it harassment. Some blaming you for being there. Typical. Alicia exhaled. Typical. The word tasted bitter. She had anticipated this. The court of public opinion rarely sided with the targeted, especially when systemic bias was involved. Ramon joined them, phone in hand. News outlets are picking it up. Local coverage, social media reels. Central City Times is running a headline about the street incident. Everyone's asking for interviews. Alicia's jaw tightened. Do not respond. Not yet. Jenna raised an eyebrow. You're not going to deny it? Or sue? Not yet. Alicia walked past the servers, hands grazing the cool metal casing. If I respond too early, I feed their narrative. I want the truth to land on my terms. They didn't argue. They knew better. Across town, Reynolds faced the first public backlash of his career. Internal affairs calls, journalists requesting statements, city officials sending cautious emails. Every interaction forced him to navigate the chaos he had once controlled. Back in Alicia's office, the hum of Nexus Grid servers sounded almost triumphant. Traffic cameras aligned. Emergency response lines stayed clear. Digital billboards flickered her company's logo in schedule rotation. The system she had built moved quietly, but intentionally, as if signaling her presence without shouting. Her phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. She ignored it. The public would come to her eventually, but she wouldn't rush them. She preferred patience, the quiet levers that made eventual victories undeniable. A reporter called. Ms. Carter, would you like to comment on the Madison Street incident? She considered her words, then said nothing. Silence was a weapon she wielded far better than any statement. The journalist, sensing hesitation, noted it as non-response and moved on. Jenna frowned. You sure about this? People are assuming the worst. I know, Alicia said. And let them. When they finally see the full picture, they'll understand who's in control and who's accountable. Even as the video spread, commentary was filtered, softened, or redirected. Every news outlet tried to frame the story as a minor misunderstanding, downplaying Reynolds' behavior, highlighting his stressful shift. Every casual bystander who posted online wrestled with words they didn't fully understand. The narrative became a tug-of-war between truth and convenience, and Alicia watched it unfold like a chessboard. In the background, Nexus Grid quietly logged public sentiment, aggregated posts, and tracked viral trajectories, not for manipulation, yet, but for understanding the patterns of misinformation and systemic dismissal. Later, Alicia convened a brief meeting with her board via video call. Faces appeared, tense, professional, eyes wide as they absorbed the clips circulating online. Don't act hastily, Alicia instructed, voice firm but calm. This is an opportunity. We are not here for spectacle. We are here for clarity and accountability. Let the system speak before we do. One board member, a middle-aged man in a tailored suit, furrowed his brow. Ms. Carter, people are asking questions. What if the city pushes back? Then we answer precisely, Alicia said. Facts, documentation, timing, no emotion, no escalation. Let the patterns emerge naturally. Chaos reveals weakness, but structure reveals truth. As the call ended, Jenna lingered. You're not afraid. Alicia smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly. Afraid keeps you compliant. I prefer calculation. Outside, the city continued as if nothing had happened. Buses glided past, neon signs flickered, pedestrians rushed along sidewalks. But beneath it all, the network she had built pulsed, anticipating movement, guiding traffic, managing the city's digital heartbeat. Somewhere, Reynolds flailed through internal memos and media requests, unaware that the woman he humiliated was orchestrating a quiet counterweight to his arrogance. Every siren, every flickering billboard, every rerouted emergency call was a reminder power wasn't always visible. And Alicia Carter's was both subtle and absolute. She returned to the window, watching the city react to its own reflection, unaware of her quiet oversight. Public attention was loud, fleeting. Control was subtle, enduring, and she had both. The incident on Madison Street was only the beginning. The viral silence, Alicia knew, was a calm before the storm. The conference room smelled of coffee and polished oak. Alicia Carter sat at the head of the long table, fingers interlaced, posture straight. Around her, the legal team and board members shifted uneasily. Each face mirrored concern, anticipation, and an unspoken fear, the exposure of power that men like Reynolds had dismissed for too long. Ms. Carter, said Elaine Martinez, her lead attorney, voice calm but firm, we've reviewed all footage, witness statements, and city protocols. You have leverage, but this isn't just about one officer. It's about institutional patterns. Alicia nodded. I know. I want accountability. Not just headlines. Not just a suspension. We expose a system, not just a symptom. Exactly, Elaine replied. She gestured to the document stacked neatly on the table. If we pursue legal action, there will be backlash. Threats, doxing, public mischaracterization. Are you prepared for that? Jenna, seated beside Alicia, exchanged a glance. Alicia met it, unwavering. I don't want revenge. I want justice. And yes, I'm prepared. Ramon interjected, tone cautious. We also have internal protocols we can trigger. Independent review boards, compliance audits. If we leverage them properly, Reynolds' network of protection begins to crumble without public spectacle. Alicia's eyes sharpened. Exactly. Let the system dismantle itself. Elaine leaned forward, tapping a pen against the table. We also need a controlled media strategy. Silence is powerful, but if it's interpreted as avoidance, the narrative flips. People will accuse you of hiding something. Alicia folded her hands over the edge of the table. Then we control the timeline. Every release, every statement, precise. No emotional outbursts. Let facts do the work. A junior board member, fidgeting with his pen, asked, "What about threats? Online harassment? The footage is already viral." Jenna spoke, voice steady. "We have cybersecurity measures in place. We monitor sentiment, identify potential threats, and can preemptively neutralize them. The digital footprint can be controlled." Alicia's gaze drifted to the windows overlooking the city. Somewhere, Reynolds' name was already circulating in private communications, whispers among officers, emails from supervisors. They didn't know it yet, but his credibility had a crack, and every system she controlled made that crack visible, inevitable. "Time is critical," Elaine said. "Every day we wait, Reynolds' allies solidify. But acting too fast risks mistakes. What's your priority?" "Accountability over speed," Alicia replied. "We let the evidence unfold. We present patterns, not anecdotes. One shove is reckless. Systemic failure is undeniable." The room absorbed her words in silence. They knew the weight behind them. Alicia was not merely reacting to an incident. She was orchestrating the exposure of entrenched bias, carefully, surgically. Jenna whispered, almost to herself, "It's like chess, every piece accounted for." "Yes," Alicia murmured. "Except this game is life, not a board. One wrong move can destroy everything." Elaine summarized the plan. Trigger the independent review through Nexus Grid compliance protocols, gather prior complaints, identify witnesses, and time the release of evidence to maximize impact while minimizing personal risk. Reynolds would be isolated without a single dramatic confrontation. His own behavior and the system's failures would do the work. Alicia exhaled slowly. The weight of preparation pressed against her shoulders, a mix of dread and determination. She knew exposure came with a cost. Relationships, sleep, peace of mind, everything she had built silently would now be tested publicly. She thought of the shove, the words, the fleeting fear. And now, strategically, she would transform that moment of vulnerability into leverage, not vengeance. Her phone buzzed. A news alert. The latest clip from Madison Street had surfaced on local channels. Reynolds was visible, gesturing defensively, yet the camera lingered on the shove. The public narrative began to shift, subtly but perceptibly. Alicia didn't respond. She allowed the silence to wake. Let the chaos swirl. Let the institutional cracks become visible. Every microsecond of delay, every controlled move, brought the reckoning closer. Ramon watched her from the side. "You're calm, but does it ever get to you? The anger?" Alicia's eyes met his. "It does, but anger is a tool, not a weapon. I don't need to fight him directly. I just need to make the truth undeniable." Jenna placed a hand on Alicia's shoulder. "We've got your back. Every system, every protocol, every precaution." Alicia nodded, allowing herself the briefest flash of gratitude. Then she returned to the window. The city moved beneath her, unaware of the silent orchestration guiding every pulse of light, every rerouted path, every digital message. She had the infrastructure, the foresight, and the patience. And Reynolds had no idea what was coming. The city was haze, invisibly. The reckoning would be public, precise, inevitable. The conference room at City Hall smelled of air conditioning and stale coffee. A half-dozen officials sat around a long mahogany table, papers stacked in neat columns, pens poised for note-taking. Lieutenant Daniels led the meeting, his expression tight. Officer Reynolds sat at the far end, shifting uneasily, the weight of public attention pressing down. Alicia Carter watched from the observation window above, unseen. She didn't need to be in the room to understand every move. There were puppets dancing to the rhythm she had already orchestrated. Through Nexus Grid secure channels, she monitored internal communications, live feed alignments, and compliance triggers. Every slip, every hesitant word, every calculated pause unfolded like a map she already knew by heart. Inside, Daniels cleared his throat. "We are here to address the incident on Madison Street. Officer Reynolds, your actions are under review. Internal Affairs has compiled multiple accounts and video evidence." Reynolds shifted. I followed protocol. She was in the street, blocking traffic. Your force was unnecessary, Daniel said, eyes fixed on him. Multiple witnesses, video evidence, and public complaints indicate excessive behavior. Reynolds opened his mouth, then hesitated. The words he had relied on, authority, invisibility, felt hollow in the weight of scrutiny. One city official, a senior legal advisor, spoke up. There had been prior complaints filed against Officer Reynolds, suppressed, minimized, never fully investigated. We now face scrutiny for systemic failure, not just individual misconduct. The room murmured. Reynolds' jaw tightened. He tried to interject, but each sentence was met with polite resistance, documentation counters, and pointed references to logs and protocols. The systems Alicia had built had already exposed patterns, and every attempt to explain away his behavior collapsed under scrutiny. Meanwhile, Alicia's phone vibrated with real-time updates. Internal memos flagged inconsistencies in Reynolds' reports. Witness statements corroborated video evidence. Complaint from years past, long buried, resurfaced automatically through compliance triggers she had quietly ensured. She smiled faintly. Control didn't feel like revenge. It felt like inevitability. Inside the room, Daniels gestured toward a monitor. A timeline appeared. Reynolds documented complaints, digital communications, footage from Madison Street, and Nexus Grid analytics detailing public sentiment. Every piece connected seamlessly, a web of accountability Reynolds could neither deny nor escape. Reynolds stared at the screen, unease spreading. The air in the room thickened, punctuated by clicking pens and the hum of the projector. Silence was the loudest sound. Officer Reynolds, Daniel said finally, voice low, deliberate. We are placing you on administrative leave pending further investigation. Effective immediately. Reynolds' face flushed red. Administrative leave? For what? One incident. For the accumulation of evidence and failure to follow protocols, Daniels replied. The public, the department, and the city deserve accountability. The boardroom exhaled collectively. Reynolds clenched his fists, aware that every person in the room now questioned not only his judgment but the system that had protected him for years. Outside, Alicia allowed herself a brief moment to breathe. She knew the battle wasn't over. Systems were exposed, but public perception was fragile. Institutional change took time, effort, and vigilance. Still, she had tilted the scales. Later that evening, in the privacy of her office, Alicia reviewed the city's response. Emails from officials, internal memos, and journalist queries piled up in real time. Each interaction confirmed the delicate balance between power, accountability, and systemic inertia. Ramon leaned against the doorframe. You did it. Quietly, effectively. You're not even visible, but they're crumbling. Alicia shook her head. It's not me they're crumbling under. It's a system. I just illuminated the cracks. Jenna entered, holding a tablet with social media analytics. Public opinion is shifting. Clips of Reynolds' misconduct are gaining traction. People are connecting the dots. Alicia nodded, eyes on the city skyline. Let them connect. Let them see the patterns. That's the point. Exposure is more powerful than outrage. In her office, she watched the digital heartbeat of the city continue undisturbed. Emergency alerts routed correctly. Traffic systems optimized, public communications synchronized. Nexus Grid hummed quietly, a silent testimony to her control. Reynolds, meanwhile, faced the first real consequences of his unchecked bias. Every colleague who had once shielded him now maintained distance. Administrative procedures ensured that no false narrative could hide the truth. The system, once his armor, now served as a lens through which his failures were undeniable. Later that night, Alicia reflected on the emotional toll. She had spent decades building this network, enduring dismissals, microaggressions, and outright bias. Her victory was real, but it came with cost. Sleep would be restless. Trust would be cautious. The world she influenced invisibly remained imperfect. Yet, as the city lights flickered below, synchronized in patterns only she fully understood, she allowed herself one quiet thought. System could fail people like her, but with vigilance, they could also protect, empower, and reveal truth. Reynolds' downfall wasn't complete. Not yet, but it had begun. And every procedural step, Every documented piece of evidence, every silent intervention ensured that when the final reckoning came, it would be absolute. By midweek, the narrative surrounding Madison Street had shifted dramatically. Social media buzzed with side-by-side clips, Reynolds shoving Alicia, juxtaposed with his prior complaints and misconduct reports. Hashtags circulated, highlighting systemic issues within the city police force. The story was no longer about one street incident. It was about patterns of abuse, unchecked power, and institutional complicity. Alicia watched it unfold from her office, a cup of untouched tea warming beside her. Every post, every viral snippet, every comment became a piece of the larger puzzle she had anticipated. Her company's analytics dashboard tracked public sentiment, revealing shifts in perception almost instantaneously. "Ms. Carter, this is unprecedented," Jenna said, hovering near the monitor. "The media is finally acknowledging your authority, not just the incident. People are talking about accountability and systemic reform." Alicia didn't smile. "It's not about me being acknowledged. It's about them seeing the truth they've ignored for years. Patterns speak louder than individuals." The next call came from a journalist at Central City Times, requesting an interview. "We want to feature your story, Ms. Carter. The public wants to know how you're involved and what led to this." "I'll do it," Alicia said, voice calm, measured, but only once the full review is complete. Facts first, sensationalism later. Across town, Reynolds fumed. He had tried every tactic he knew, controlling the narrative, contacting colleagues for support, issuing vague public statements. Every attempt backfired. Each new post, each resurfaced complaint, each corroborating witness statement chipped away at the illusion of control he once took for granted. Alicia's phone vibrated. A secure notification. Her legal team had verified additional complaints that had been previously buried by the department. Redactions were removed, emails unhidden, and evidence compiled. Reynolds' history of misconduct was no longer obscured. She gathered her team for a strategic session. "Each piece of evidence," she began, "demonstrates more than individual wrongdoing. It exposes systemic failure. The public, the press, and internal authorities will connect these dots. Our goal is clarity, not spectacle. Every narrative attempt to dilute this story will fail because the facts speak for themselves." Elaine Martinez, her attorney, nodded. "We recommend releasing the timeline to select journalists first, accompanied by a statement emphasizing systemic patterns. Reynolds' misbehavior will be undeniable, but the focus remains on the department's failure to act." Ramon, her CTO, added, "And Nexus Grid can continue to monitor public feeds and detect any attempts to distort the narrative. Social media misdirection will be mitigated automatically." Alicia leaned back, considering the weight of it all. Years of subtle bias, microaggressions, and dismissals had culminated in this moment. She had endured, observed, and waited. Now, Reynolds' arrogance and the system complacency were exposed almost entirely through her orchestration, quietly and effectively. Later, she agreed to the interview. The journalist, expecting a defensive, emotional reaction, instead found Alicia precise, calm, and commanding. "Your shove on Madison Street sparked public outrage," the journalist began. "It was not the shove that matters," Alicia corrected gently. "It was a pattern of behavior that the shove revealed. One incident can be dismissed. Patterns cannot. My goal is accountability, not personal vengeance." The journalist's notebook filled quickly. Every phrase, every pointed observation emphasized clarity, professionalism, and systemic critique. Meanwhile, Reynolds' internal world crumbled. Supervisors questioned why prior complaints had gone unaddressed. Colleagues whispered about accountability. The city's ethics board, already reviewing the case, moved faster than expected, spurred by the clear documentation and public pressure. In Alicia's office, Jenna spoke softly, almost reverently. "You're changing the system." Alicia shook her head. "I'm just revealing it. The system will change itself when patterns are undeniable. Truth doesn't need advocacy, it only needs exposure." The evening passed in quiet focus. Alicia reviewed every post, every comment, every news clip. She documented public reactions, legal responses, and departmental communications. Every note of power Reynolds had relied upon had been undermined, quietly but irreversibly. Finally, she allowed herself a brief pause, staring out at the city skyline. Lights blinked like data points. Traffic flowed like code in a vast, living system. She had illuminated a truth long ignored. Systemic bias could no longer hide behind authority. And somewhere, Reynolds realized that the woman he had shoved, dismissed, underestimated, invisible, was now the one orchestrating exposure that could not be silenced, no matter how he tried. Alicia's voice in the room was calm but unwavering. "Let them see the truth," she said. "Let them understand that one act of arrogance is never just one act. Patterns are inevitable." The city, oblivious to the silent network guiding it, continued. But the public, the press, and the system itself would never look at Reynolds the same way again. And Alicia Carter, quiet, precise, and methodical, had ensured it. Officer Mark Reynolds stared at the notice pinned to the precinct bulletin board. Administrative leave. Pending investigation. Each word felt heavier than his badge. The whispers had started. Colleagues who once laughed at complaints now spoke cautiously, papers rustling like confessions in the quiet room. He had built his career on routine, on the assumption that systems protected men like him. Today, those systems betrayed him. Video evidence, past complaints, and Nexus-grid precise documentation left no room for spin. Every thread of control he had relied on was fraying. Lieutenant Daniels called him into his office. Reynolds' heart thudded against his ribs as he sat across from the lieutenant. "Mark," Daniels began, voice steady, "the investigation has uncovered a pattern of misconduct, including prior complaints that were previously dismissed. Your actions on Madison Street are not isolated. The department cannot shield you anymore." Reynolds swallowed hard. "But I was just following protocol. That woman." Daniels held up a hand. "Intent doesn't erase impact. Systems fail when individuals act without accountability. You're suspended until the investigation concludes." Reynolds clenched his fists under the desk, fury and disbelief warring within him. He wanted to shout, to protest, to invoke every procedural loophole he knew. But the mounting evidence, meticulous and undeniable, silenced him. Meanwhile, Alicia Carter watched the unfolding consequences from her office. She didn't feel triumph, not in the way revenge would taste. What she felt was something heavier, satisfaction laced with the weight of inevitability. Systems had failed, but now exposure forced them to confront their weaknesses. Reynolds would face consequences, but the cost of injustice had always been real for people like her. Her phone buzzed with a notification. Her interview had been published. Quotes highlighted systemic failures, institutional complacency, and the public's right to accountability. Comments streamed in support, outrage, acknowledgement. Reynolds' name trended, alongside headlines of internal reforms and official inquiries. Jenna approached. "The city's ethics board is moving fast. They are requesting more statements. Reynolds' colleagues are coming forward." Alicia nodded. "Let them. Fact will do the work. No theatrics." Later, Reynolds received formal notification, charges for misconduct and falsifying reports. His career, once shielded by assumptions of authority, now crumbled publicly. He reached for his radio, only to hesitate. Every network he had trusted, every protocol he had assumed protected him, had been exposed. Even the systems he had taken for granted now reflected his failings. Alicia's team monitored the fallout quietly. Board meetings, press releases, internal memos, all aligned seamlessly with her strategy. She had orchestrated exposure with precision, turning the public incident into undeniable proof of systemic negligence. One evening, Reynolds found himself summoned for a mediated conversation with Alicia. She arrived with calm authority, her posture unshakable. "Mr. Reynolds," she said, voice even, "I hope you understand that this isn't personal. It's about accountability. You chose to wield your power recklessly. The consequences are procedural, systemic, and public. There is no negotiation beyond truth." Reynolds struggled to find words. There was no apology that could undo what had happened, no defense that could erase the compiled evidence, no maneuver that could reclaim his authority. Alicia's calm precision cut deeper than any accusation. I didn't mean," he began. Alicia shook her head. "Intent does not erase impact, and the impact is documented, undeniable. This is your reckoning." learn from it, or the lessons will continue without you. The meeting ended quietly. No theatrics, no raised voices, just acknowledgement of inevitability. Reynolds left, understanding that the world had shifted. He was no longer untouchable. Alicia returned to her office, leaning against the window. The city hummed beneath her, lights synchronized, traffic flowing, emergency systems precise. Control had been exercised not through aggression or vengeance, but through calculated exposure and systemic awareness. Ramon approached cautiously. You could have done it differently, publicly, made a scene. Alicia shook her head. That's not power. That's theatrics. Systems and facts, they endure. People and institutions bend only when confronted with undeniable patterns. Outside, the city continued obliviously, unaware of the subtle orchestration that had shifted accountability from unchecked authority to responsible oversight. Reynolds' fall was complete in procedure, if not entirely in psyche. Alicia knew the emotional cost would linger, trust fractured, sleep restless, but so would the assurance that truth had been illuminated. Justice, procedural and poetic, had arrived, and the city, once guided blindly, now pulsed under the quiet precision of a woman who had been dismissed, underestimated, and underestimated again, but never invisible. Alicia Carter walked slowly along the quiet streets of downtown, rain-slick sidewalks reflecting neon signs and traffic lights. The city moved around her as if nothing had changed, unaware that the network beneath its feet had shifted in her hands. She paused at a crosswalk, watching the ebb and flow of pedestrians, taxis, and buses. Each motion was familiar, mapped, anticipated, her invisible infrastructure at work. The past weeks weighed on her. The shove, the viral video, Reynolds' downfall, systemic exposure. Each step toward accountability had been necessary, but every victory carried a cost. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by replayed encounters, the weight of responsibility, and the knowledge that systems, even when wielded wisely, could never fully protect those they served. Jenna approached quietly, her umbrella dripping. "You okay?" she asked. Alicia nodded, though her gaze lingered on the skyline. "I'm fine. It's just, the city keeps moving, whether people see the control behind it or not." Ramon joined them, hands in pockets. "You've changed things. The department, the public awareness, they'll remember this. Systems will be reviewed differently now." "Yes," Alicia said, "but systems aren't enough. People forget. Institutions drift back toward old patterns if vigilance fades. That's the real cost of power. It's continuous, never complete." They walked in silence for a few blocks, the soft drizzle mixing with the hum of traffic. Alicia thought of her mother, the warnings about men who underestimated her, about the subtle forces that shaped a lifetime. She thought of the countless meetings where she had been overlooked, dismissed, or silenced. And she understood something fundamental. Endurance was a form of control. Resilience could outlast aggression. Patience could outmaneuver arrogance. Her phone buzzed, a notification from Nexus Grid, confirming the final compliance audit. Everything had been documented, every protocol executed, every systemic weakness revealed. Reynolds' career and influence were now permanently curtailed. Justice, precise and procedural, had been served. Yet Alicia didn't smile. There was no triumph, no fanfare, only awareness of the cost, both personal and communal. The city was safer in principle, yet she carried the invisible weight of vigilance. Every light, every camera, every digital pulse reminded her that control was never total, only temporary, and always accompanied by responsibility. Jenna looked up at her. "Do you ever feel exhausted by it all?" Alicia exhaled slowly. "Every day. But that's the nature of responsibility. You can't take shortcuts, and you can't rest until the patterns change. Even then, you remain accountable." Ramon glanced at the passing traffic. "You've built a backbone the city never sees. They'll never know how much work went into keeping everything aligned." Alicia tilted her head, voice soft but deliberate. "And that's how it should be. Power doesn't need recognition. It needs precision. Resilience doesn't need applause. It needs endurance." They reached the intersection where Madison Street began. She remembered the shove, the red and blue lights, the city that watched and did nothing. Now, Standing there, she felt the shift, subtle but irreversible. Systems and truth had aligned. Accountability had been enforced. But the memory of humiliation, of bias, and of injustice remained, etched into her consciousness as both warning and lesson. Alicia lifted her gaze to the skyline, lights reflecting like a digital pulse in the rainy night. She thought about the work still ahead, monitoring patterns, protecting the vulnerable, and holding institutions accountable. It was unending, and that was a point. She whispered to herself, almost as a vow. Control never erases harm, but it forces truth into the light. The crosswalk sign changed, and they moved forward together. Rain continued to fall softly, the city alive with movement, traffic flowing, systems humming quietly under her watchful eye. She knew the cost of vigilance, but she also understood its power. As they disappeared into the urban night, the city carried on, unaware of the invisible hand guiding it, unaware that justice had been quietly woven into its very fabric. Alicia Carter had endured. She had observed. She had acted. And in the silence that followed, she carried both the scars and the strength of truth.